you both are from the Perkins School of the Blind. Can you tell us about yourselves? Brian, do you want to go first?
Yes, of course. My name's Brian Switzer. I'm the Assistive Technology Instructor for the Career Launch program at Perkins. Career Launch is a work readiness program for young adults who are blind or visually impaired, and we help them transition from high school into their first job. I'm also a published author. I've written 2 books. One is called Walking My Paws, an anthology on working dogs, and Walking My Shoes, an anthology on Usher syndrome. And yeah, that's about me.
Perfect. And Kate?
Sure. Professionally, I'm the Associate Director of College Success at Perkins. I'm a certified teacher of students with vision impairments and the lead coach for our transition program that's virtual for high school students who aspire to go to college. More personally, I live in Massachusetts. I have a 3-year-old yellow lab guide dog named Dodger. I am totally blind, have been for about 20 years now. I love to run, hike, swim, anything outside really, especially in the summer.
That's awesome. I know Boston and the Massachusetts area very well. I went for my first year and a half of college. I went to Wheaton in Norton, Mass. So I know Massachusetts very big, but I know the area very well, and it's a great state.
I grew up in Easton, which is one town over from
I
Wheaton
know
College.
Easton. Oh my goodness, we used to go all the time, my friends and I. I just transferred; they didn't have the right support services for me. But no, that's funny. I know the East. I know Easton very well.
That's awesome.
Fun. Okay, so you both work at Perkins. And so for those that don't know, can you, I guess, I don't know, maybe you want to split it up into the programs that we're both focusing on. But what is Perkins School for the Blind, and how does it work, Brian?
I'll let Kate take the question first,
Okay.
and then I'll go after.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian. Well, Perkins is the oldest school for the blind in the United States and the second oldest school for the blind in the world. We are a multifaceted organization that is committed to improving the lives of children and adults with vision impairment, blindness, and deafblindness. We obviously have a very long and rich history, but we're always looking for new initiatives to enhance the education, confidence, and skills of individuals to help them reach their full potential. Brian, do you want to add anything?
No. Well, Perkins School for the Blind had some really famous students like Helen Keller, Ann Sullivan, Laura Bridgman, just to name a few. Those are some of our most famous students who have gone through Perkins. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you guys are located in the Boston area, correct?
Yes, in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Okay, wonderful. All right, this is the first question that was added. So just letting you know. So again, if it's mishapped or can't answer it fully, that's okay, but I'll ask it. So beginning in 1829, Perkins founders were committed to opening the doors to education, literacy, and independence for people who are blind and deafblind. What would you say was in agreement with Samuel Gridley, Ho, the first director of the Perkins School for the Blind, that the Perkins has remained true to its roots for over the 175 years?
Well, every person, regardless of disability, every person has the right to learn and live the life they want. And that philosophy is one that began many years ago with the founding of Perkins and still holds true to this day. We create possibilities for children and adults locally, nationally, and even around the globe.
It's amazing. Brian, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, Samuel Howe was one of the founders, and he traveled to Paris, where there was the first ever school for the blind, and he saw children playing on the playground and living out their fullest potential. And I think when he came back to the U.S., he thought to himself, "Why can't we do that here?" And he, went ahead with that mission and started Perkins School for the Blind, the first school for the blind in the U.S. And just like Kate said, made sure that every person with a visual impairment can live out their full potential.
It's wonderful.
Hey, this is Perrin. Could I just interrupt for a second? Hey, Brian, could you adjust your camera maybe just an inch lower? It's like sometimes, yeah, perfect. Yep, that's good. It was just starting to bother me, like your chin when you were talking was getting very close to the bottom. And I was like, let's just fix this.
Okay, no worries. So like we spoke about, but Laura Bridgman, Anne Sullivan, Helen Keller are some of the most famous names to come through Perkins School of the Blind, or for the blind. How have their successes shaped Perkins today?
Well, as I said, we believe that every child, every person can learn. And in many ways, this philosophy is rooted in the early successes of those individuals that you mentioned. So we not only practice that belief at Perkins, but in all of our messaging that we spread, again, on a global level to educators who are helping young adults, children prepare to live their best lives, to the very work that we do here in Watertown. It's everywhere, everyone can learn, and we want to create possibilities to make that happen.
Yeah, Annie Sullivan herself was a teacher of the visually impaired with her student Helen Keller, and learned everything she learned from being at Perkins School for the Blind, and went on to teach Helen Keller, the most famous student ever. And so we're committed to working with both TVIs and children with visual impairment all over the world. We don't even just serve here in the Boston area, but also Perkins International is a global branch of Perkins that serves in Africa, in Europe, in the South America, Central America, North America, anywhere in the world. Perkins is there, expanding opportunities.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So at Perkins, you're members of the college and career readiness teams. Okay, we'd like to know more. So Kate, will you speak to college readiness, including the transition programs as well? Yeah, including the transition programs.
Sure. Well, the transition to college can be difficult waters for anyone to navigate, but especially for those who are blind and visually impaired, there are additional things to consider. At Perkins, we have many initiatives to address college readiness, including the program that I work as part of College Success. And College Success includes several initiatives to help prepare individuals for college, but also to prepare the world to educate our students with vision impairments. So we work not only with directly with students, but we also provide support to universities and really anyone, including teachers and families who are interested in learning more about how to help prepare students for college, and as Brian will talk about, for career. One of our transition programs is entirely virtual. It's called Compass, and it is a 9-month program for high school students who are blind or visually impaired who aspire to go to college. During this program, we work one-on-one with students as well as a member of their family and a member of their educational team, oftentimes their teacher of the visually impaired, for one-on-one coaching sessions that happen weekly. So I meet, for example, with a student for an hour, and we talk about their orientation and mobility skills, for example, because we know those are very important skills to be able to cross streets, navigate public transportation, get to a place when you want and be able to do that independently. So we might talk about O&M if that's an area that they really are concerned about for their transition to college, or if they're just curious. We have many students, for instance, who have never used a cane before, but their vision impairment is such that they may benefit from using one. So we just explore how can the use of a cane, for example, be advantageous for you once you go to college. And then we also have monthly workshops, one Saturday for about 3 hours, in which all the members of what we call the learning triad, that is the student, the member of the family, and an educational team member, they all come together and we discuss really relevant topics for college readiness, including laws that are especially important, like the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehab Act of 1973, knowing your rights and responsibilities in college versus versus secondary education, advocacy, independent living. What is it like to be in a dorm? How do you make friends on a campus? All the things that students with vision impairments, and really students in general, are thinking about, often concerned about, when they make that transition to college. And as I said, we're also working with parents, family members, and teachers to address some of the things that come up for them. For families, we're often talking about how to step back and enable the student to kind of leave the nest with the greatest success possible. But from a family member's perspective, that can be pretty difficult. And for educators, we're talking about what are the students' skills that they have right now, and how do they align with the goals that they've set for their post-secondary transition. Brian, you want to talk about some of the employment stuff we got going on at Perkins?
Yes, of course. So we have two SITTA program where we get student ready for college, but we also get student ready for a career. Some of our students have already completed college. In fact, we even had one student who was a master's degree recipient. And we have some students who have a high school degree, some who have some college but never completed college. So we have a wide range of students who with very academic experiences who come to the Career Launch program and decide that they're ready to work. We take in students age 18 to 35 who have a high school degree and obviously need to have a visual impairment. And we work with them for 14 months to get them ready for a job. The first 2 months of the training program where they work with myself and the associate director, Alicia Smith, on various skills. They work with me on assistive technology, as well as some of the blindness skills that you wouldn't think of. How to talk to coworkers about your visual impairment. What kind of right do you have in the workplace? What kind of accommodation can you ask for? And how can you troubleshoot and problem solve on the job? Your computer breakdown, what step number 2 or step number 3? All the things we talk about, get people ready for the workplace. Alicia worked with them on a lot of skills, but particularly the customer success skills. Our program places people in customer success roles, which can be a wide range of roles, answering phone calls, responding to emails, working in an IT department, working in an HR department, any kind of job you can think of. They probably have a customer success role where they're working one-on-one with customers, resolving their issues, making sure that they leave happier than when they came in with their issue. And so once they complete the 2-month program, they then work with our associate director, Angel Nash, for 12 months, and they work on resume skills, interviewing skills, mock interviewing, making sure their accommodations are in place. We have a group of employer partners who we work with and help place them in jobs. We don't 100% guarantee that our student will get a job because our jobs are competitive. These are competitive job that anyone can apply for. Our students have to apply on an equal footing with everyone else. But with that being said, we've had a high success rate of students receiving jobs and working. And so I'm very excited. We're in our 4th go around right now in the spring. We're currently in our fourth go around, and I can't wait to see what the group will end up doing and achieving once they leave the training portion of the program.
Amazing. All right, so let's talk about COVID because that's been crazy. It's a global pandemic. How has COVID affected Perkins in both its educators as well as students? Kate, Brian, which of you do you want to go first?
Brian,
Kate,
you want to start? Oh, sure, I'm happy to. Well, COVID has really shed light on some of the social injustices for many groups, including individuals with vision impairment and other disabilities. All over the world, people are having difficulty accessing technology, being able to learn online. But imagine if you're visually impaired, trying to learn something like Braille, a code that you read with your hands. If you're doing that virtually, it can be incredibly difficult. Perkins teachers are doing amazing work, but it can be tough. And also, when you're blind, naturally, you're a lot more hands-on, which is really hard at a time in this world when everyone is saying hands off in order to stay safe. Not to mention that individuals who are blind and visually impaired all travel in different ways. Some use a white cane, some have a guide dog, some use other tools like a monocular that helps their vision. Some don't use any devices, but they rely on their functional vision. Nevertheless, sometimes it's difficult to know how close you are to another individual if you can't see them. And, as we hear, stay 6 feet apart. Well, unfortunately, my guide dog can't tell me if I'm 6 feet away from someone. So unless somebody speaks up and says, oh, you're in my 6-foot bubble, I might be too close. Or I might be taking public transportation and I may accidentally sit, within a seat or two of someone, hoping to find a little bit more distance. So there are some barriers that have been presented, but at the same time, I think that virtual learning and some of the other circumstances that have resulted from COVID have actually been quite beneficial, not all bad for individuals who are blind and visually impaired. As an example, many of my students have started exploring taking online college classes, and that has removed some of the barriers for them, including if they didn't quite yet have the orientation and mobility skills to take a bus or a train, travel to a college campus. Now they can just hop online and participate in the class from anywhere as long as they have internet connection and a device to log in. At the same time, we want to make sure that our individuals at Perkins who participate in our college and career programs, that they have equal access and opportunities as everyone. So I just want to reiterate that while COVID has presented some challenges and opportunities, such as the one I mentioned with, having options to learn virtually, we do encourage that once things get back to normal and traveling isn't such a stressor, that they pick up that orientation and mobility skills training. So if they choose to go onto a college campus or take a job that's far from their home, they can do that, because we know that individuals who are blind and visually impaired or deafblind, they can do whatever they want to do. They can live their best lives, and we want to find ways to make that possible at Perkins. Brian, you want to talk a little bit more about your perspective on this?
Yeah, of course. It has presented a lot of challenges initially. Some of our students were told that they had to go home from their job, and that very traumatizing for someone who is just starting out in their first job. But a lot of our students have opened up and they're working virtually now. So even though they're not in their physical workplaces, they're able to carry out their function virtually. And one of the big, opportunities here is that, commuting to and from work is a barrier for a lot of people with visual impairments. You know, unfortunately, a lot of it aren't able to drive legally speaking. Who knows? Maybe with the new Tesla out, we'll be able to drive soon enough. But as it stands right now, you know, not being able to drive to work means that we have to depend on other forms of transportation, like public transportation, Uber and Lyft. But they do get expensive, and commuting is a great secondary option for those students. And I'm hoping that more workplaces will be open to telecommuting as a option for our students. That, you know, a lot of jobs can be performed remotely, and so hopefully workplaces will be more open to that in the future.
Amazing. So taking, I guess, okay, taking a wider lens of COVID and kind of the takeaways of COVID, can you, Kate, talk about the social injustices brought to light for many groups, including people with disabilities?
Absolutely. Well, you know, it really has shed a lot of light on socioeconomic challenges for individuals. For instance, you know, so many people, especially at the beginning of COVID, stopped going out into the world to stores and got things delivered. And that's expensive. There are fees. You may not live in a place where you feel safe to have things just put on your doorstep in case, you know, they get swiped. Or for people who are blind, if you live somewhere where you don't have a porch or a designated drop-off spot for packages, you may not have an easy time finding where things get left. So, I mean, there are so many examples of things that, you know, if you're blind, you couldn't just hop in your car. A lot of people I know with typical vision would say, I just was so tired of being in my house. So there were days I would just go for an hour or two long car ride where they didn't have to worry about being around anybody else, but it was a different space than their home. Or they would go for really, really long walking adventures of places where they had never been so that they could see different parts of their communities. Well, for people who are blind and visually impaired, while it is possible to, of course, go on a walking exploration of your neighborhood or even somewhere unfamiliar, there are challenges with that, some of which I already mentioned, like knowing how close people are, or if you're in an unfamiliar area, if you're not sure, you know, just about the orientation of the place. And then certainly, Brian, I can't speak for you, but I'm not someone who's blind who really is ready to take on driving yet. So for my safety and the safety of others. So hopping in a car, it's just not a possibility unless I go with someone. And then I may be putting myself and the other person at risk because we're in an enclosed car, you know, COVID guidelines and everything. So there are so many instances when there's inequity. And I think that because we're over a year into COVID, much has been addressed. We're finding ways to provide families and students and adults who don't have access to, for instance, computers or the internet. We're finding ways to bring those technologies to them, but there's still a lot more broadly that could be done to make things better for everyone. Brian, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you said it perfectly.
Brian, as you mentioned, you have written a few books. Can you tell us the books that you've written, I guess just kind of an overview, and what prompted you to write these books?
Yeah, certainly. I've written, as I mentioned earlier, Walk in My Shoes, an anthology on Usher syndrome. For those of you who don't know, Usher syndrome is a genetic condition that causes dual hearing and vision loss. So I am considered deafblind, although I do have a little bit of usable hearing, as you can tell. And the book is a group of us who all live with Usher syndrome decided to get together and write a book. When I was a kid, we were always told that we would never meet someone else with Usher syndrome ever in our lives because it's so rare. And in fact, nowadays with social media, we been able to form groups and find each other and communicate with people in the United States and across the globe who all live with Usher syndrome. And there's been plenty of books written from the medical perspective of Usher syndrome, what the causes are, what the different diagnoses mean. And that's all fun and wonderful. But we want to give a perspective on what it's like to actually live with Usher syndrome. I know when my parents got the diagnosis, when I was 11, that I had Usher syndrome, they weren't sure where to go from there. They weren't sure, they had never met someone with Usher syndrome. They never knew what that meant for me as an individual. They knew what the medical diagnosis was, but they didn't know what that meant for me as an individual. And so we wanted to write the book so that parents and other adults with Usher syndrome and anyone who's interested in learning more about it could get more of a personal perspective of what it's like to live with Usher syndrome. I have a wonderful guide dog that I live with and travel with. I'm married and I have a baby on the way. I work full time, and I don't think my parents would have imagined that life for me back when they got the diagnosis. And so that's why I want people to understand and know about Usher syndrome. The other book I've written is called Walk in My Paws, an anthology on working dogs. A bunch of us with service dogs, all sorts of service dogs, from hearing dogs, PTSD dogs, dogs that work with people with autism, you name it. We got together and wrote a book about our perspective of living and working with these wonderful creatures that help us every day be able to live our full lives. And obviously my book is my portion of the book is all about my guide dog Intrigue, who is currently 7 years old, a Labrador Retriever. She's mostly black with a little bit of tan. So about some of our adventures and misadventures traveling around together, what it really like to live with a guide dog, an experience that a lot of people will never fully understand and appreciate. She's my best friend. We work together all day. She helped made sure I get to and from work and all the places I want to go. But at the end of the night, she also cuddled up with me. Since my wife got pregnant, she's also been cuddling a little bit more with my wife. We think she knows that the baby's coming. So it's very sweet and cute. And I think everyone should check out the book. They're available on Amazon as well as the National Library Service. If you want an acceptable version, you can find them online.
It's amazing. We both have dogs. So you know, as you were talking about, like, the love of dogs. So I have a dog. I have a mini golden doodle. She's 2 years old. She is the best thing that she's the best. So I can resonate with both of you on guide dogs. Obviously they serve a purpose too, but they're great creatures. She actually could be technically a service dog if I wanted it to be more like a psychiatric standpoint. She technically is certified as an emotional support animal, but it's not something that I need, but it's more just to have since I qualify. Anyways, they're the best. But those books, Brian, I'm gonna pick one up and read it. They sound amazing.
That's awesome. I really hope you do.
No, I definitely will. As individuals with a vision impairment that developed when you were teens, there obviously were many, many different changes that occurred. I know, like, specifically with you, Brian, being deafblind, and then Kate, blind. Blind. Are there any other, like, stories or perspectives that you'd like to share personally on losing your sight / like hearing for you, Brian? So I guess I'll start with you, Brian, since we would like you to discuss the job hunting process.
Yeah, with the diagnosis of Usher syndrome and specifically the eye condition is retinitis pigmentosa, it's a progressive vision loss. So my vision had changed over the years significantly. And through the teenage years, that's some of the most difficult years to be adjusting and going through vision loss. a lot of people want to, that about the time that your friend want hang out at night, and when you're night blind, that poses a lot of challenges. I wouldn't drive my car at night because it was just too dark and difficult. So I'd have friends pick me up, and I'd make little deals so that they would be willing to uh, drive me around, and we'd hang out. But overall, I'd say I had a great experience through high school and college. But it does teach you how to adapt. It makes you think on the fly. You'll face challenges that your friends don't have to face, and you have to be ready to adapt and figure and problem solve. And that's probably why I love math so much. It's just that problem solving aspect, because I've always had to be able to problem solve. Yeah.
Kate?
And sure. So I lost my vision completely and unexpectedly when I was a teenager, just a couple of years before graduating from high school. I got a virus called meningitis that attacked very suddenly, went straight to my nervous system, blinded me very quickly. I was extremely ill for several months and came out alive. So I was pretty grateful, just happened to not be able to see. And I knew that I could live with that. But I did have to really experience a shift in what it means to navigate this world in non-visual ways. And because the graduation from high school was in the near future, I wanted to go to college, but I didn't really know what that was going to look like for me. And I certainly didn't know anyone else who was blind or visually impaired. So in many ways, I had to be my own best advocate, my own pioneer for the success that I knew could unfold in front of me, but I didn't exactly know how that was going to happen. And so I went to a school for the blind for a year where I got extensive, intensive training on skills like independent living, Braille, orientation and mobility, technology, and so on. And at that point, I also met other individuals who were my age and older, role models who were blind, who set examples for me as to what life can look like when you have a disability. And I learned quickly that what life can look like with a disability is a lot like what life can look like without a disability as well. I have achieved a lot in my life. I say that proudly because there was a time that I didn't know if I was going to be able to. So I'm very proud that I went and got an undergrad, a bachelor's degree, then on to a master's degree. I lived on my own just a few years after first losing my vision, but it was not an easy road. And I think anyone who experiences vision loss is necessary for them or helpful to connect with others, build a network of people who are blind and visually impaired, again, to just kind of get a sense of what life can be like and know that there is a whole lot of hope and possibility on the other side with the right training, support systems, and ultimately the right attitude, I think can be especially helpful. And that's what many of the programs at Perkins aim to do, is help people not only who experience vision loss later in childhood, adolescence, or young adulthood, but also just people who have been congenitally blind or who have been born with a vision impairment, to help them and their families navigate the services that they might get and all of the possibilities that are out there in the world for people with those disabilities to really thrive.
Those are great personal stories. So, and this is a question from my standpoint because everyone's different. And I think it's very, from somebody who's not blind or has a visual impairment, I think everyone always wonders when you wake up in the morning, what does your eye see? Is it blurry? Is it like gray? Is it completely black? Like and I know that some people have a little, like they can recognize colors, but so how does that translate with both of your impairments? So I guess, Brian, do you want to go first?
Certainly, I can't speak for Kate's experience
Right, we'll
or
do
anyone
Kate
else's. But from my experience, I still have light perception. I can't see colors or shapes or anything like that. So when I first wake up in the morning, the room is just pitch black. I can't see a single thing at all. And then as the day goes on, if there's a light on somewhere, I can kind of tell that there's a little bit of brightness around me. And so I can really see dark and brightness, and I'm able to kind of figure out, if the room is a little bit brighter or darker, especially nighttime, daytime, things will shift. But I mostly, use my hands and feel around and navigate my house that way.
Right. Yeah, you have to rely on your other senses. I just think it's really interesting because some people don't have any idea of, okay, you're blind, but what does your eye like, quote unquote, like see? I mean, no, you can't see the world, but whether it be light perception, whether it be colors, whether it not be any of that, whether it just be a bunch of gray blurriness and so forth. So I always think it's interesting to know everyone's different experience. So Kate, would you like to tell us yours?
Sure. And to your point, I want to preface my personal response by saying that visual impairment and blindness is a full spectrum of vision that ranges from no light perception or someone who is totally blind to individuals who can see quite a lot. And so the visual experiences of every person who is visually impaired can be different by a lot or a little bit. For me personally, I have no light perception, so it's like a black screen, but I will say it's very unlike being in the dark. And that's something I really want to emphasize because oftentimes people have said things to me like, oh, it must be so depressing living in the dark all the time. But I don't see it that way at all. Literally, I don't see it that way because, even though it's blackness that's in front of my eyes, I am absorbing through the other senses that I have. The world around me isn't a dark place. It's full of other vibrance. It's full of the rich scents that are in my house in the morning, or the sounds that I hear from my partner in the other room, or, Alexa playing some music that I love, or the taste of the breakfast that I'm about to have, So life is rich and full and wonderful, regardless of what your level of vision impairment is. Some people, as you mentioned, see colors, some see blurry, some see dark, some see light. It really does range. So there is no one answer for when someone wakes up with a vision impairment, what do they see? Because it's going to be highly individualized depending on their visual condition and many other factors.
Right. No, absolutely. All right. So I added a little bit, same thing, obviously, what you guys both went over with Corinne. So I'm mindful of the time. So I'm probably just going to ask one, and then we're going to get to your last question, or the last question you guys came up with advice. So if you could think of one word that best sums the vision or mission of Perkins School for the Blind, what would it be? Brian, you want to go first?
Support.
Meaning like word that would the vision and the mission of Perkins School for the Blind.
Support. We're all about
support. That's your word. Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, Perkins is all about supporting parents of children with vision loss, supporting children with visual impairment, supporting teachers of the visually impaired, through Perkins International, working with teachers of the visually impaired across the globe, basically providing support of any and all kind, for children with visual impairment all through various phases of life, not just primary school, not just secondary school, not just college success, not just career launch, but every phase of life.
I love your word, Brian, support. That's a good one. For me, I think my word to summarize, Perkins is possibility, because we are always finding new ways to create possibilities for individuals who are visually impaired, blind, deafblind, and additional disabilities. And so I think that when our rich history first began, the founders saw possibilities, and still to this day, it's something that we hold true at the core of our mission and philosophy. Find those possibilities and create pathways for people to live their best lives.
Amen to that. I can't wait to come up and visit post-COVID. Lastly, any advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with others? Brian, do you want to go first?
Of course, networking is extremely important. It's important for landing that job, finding an employer who is understanding about what it entails to have an employee who has a visual impairment, networking with, as Kate mentioned before, role models that she'd had, who gave her advice and supported her all throughout all along the way. I know I have the same role models and support system. People have networked with over the years, the Boston Renegade Beatball team, you name it. People who are just willing to help you out, give you advice, even if it's something like technology. And my screen reader fails, I have people I can reach out to and ask for advice. You name it, networking is so important when you have a visual impairment, and it's important for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Kate?
For individuals with disabilities, my advice is to find ways to capitalize on your strengths and not let other people define you by ways that you don't want to be defined. Most often it is to be defined by one's disability, but there's so much more to a person, and we have to be our best advocates to show the world that we are more than just one way they may define us with the label of our disability. And my advice to allies of people with disabilities is to find ways to get to know each person on an individual level, find out who they are as people with disabilities, but more than anything, just as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest message that I get across the board, obviously, including myself, because it's definitely true, but you really have to, yes, obviously being blind, having Usher syndrome is a part of you, but it doesn't define you as a person, like whatsoever. I'm just talking about an outsider, but your professional goals, your jobs, your personal life, having a child, Brian, so forth, being married, like that's who you are. And you navigate, your disability. But yeah, I don't think people always realize that. And I actually find it to be quite upsetting when people define somebody by their disability, like even the words that they use, such as like, oh, look at the blind kid. No, why don't you say, look at the kid that is blind? Like it's, the wording's like, it's important, and it's just unfortunate. But we're adding more inclusivity and knowledge to the world for those that are not as aware. So anyways, this was wonderful. Kate and Brian, you guys are amazing. I look forward post-COVID to coming up and hopefully meeting you in person. I'll come to Perkins to see you all.